Welcome to Real People. This is Stephanie Allensworth. And for 2020, we are going to be focused on holistic healing. My guest today is my favorite friend, Kat Thompson, to talk about emotional issues. And Kat, take it away. Let's go.
Surely you meant to say 2024.
Oh,
I thought so.
it's been since 2020.
I know. I was going to say, it's so nice to be back here. You know, we had this little hiatus, and one of the things that I really preoccupied myself with during the last few years is emotional health, which, as you know, has been my forte for a long, long time. But I really kind of doubled down on everything that I was doing and teaching during the last few years because I've noticed an increase in people's irritability, people's inability to handle things that go wrong. Everybody seems to have like a super short fuse right now. So I'm glad that we're doing this again because I feel like it's really important for people to understand what is the purpose of emotion and how do you evolve from a place of reaction into a place of, you know, something other than that. So thank you for having me.
Well, I am so glad you're here to talk about this because it's very timely, as you said. We have a lot of high-strung people out there right now, and they don't even know why themselves. Mm-hmm. So what can they do?
Well, let's first start by talking about, in the work that I do, there's 5 master emotions. So let's just first talk about what those emotions are and what their purpose is. And I think that once people understand that emotions have a purpose, they have an immature expression, and then there's a way to evolve them to a mature expression. And what is the mature expression supposed to be for, right? So it's not like you just have these feelings and then you have to kind of deal with them, and sometimes they're feelings that are feeling good and sometimes they're not so good, but it's that each emotion has a purpose, and its purpose is to be evolved to help you be a powerful creator of your own reality. So we're going to start with grief because it's a pentagram, and so there's 5 points on this pentagram, 5 emotions, 5 master emotions. You know, there's all kinds of, it's in the Chinese 5-element tradition is what I've studied. So grief, it always starts with grief. Grief is, the purpose of grief is to let go, of course. When we cry, when we grieve, when we take the time to really feel the loss of something, it creates a change in the body, both physically and energetically. And what grief does, the purpose of grief and the purpose of grieving, is that it not only helps to release what is no longer in your life, whether it's because it's no longer living or because it's no longer necessary. There's always a grieving process. Even the worst divorces, there's grief, right? Because it's the idea that when you grieve, you let go of something. But here's the cool thing. It not only lets go of something, it creates a vacancy for something new to come in. And I think that that's the part that why people resist grieving, because they don't understand that it's actually creating a space for something new. So it's important to grieve. Like sometimes I just sit down and grieve the loss of my youth because I miss certain things about my flexibility, my nonstop energy. I miss those things. And it may not be that I'll ever get them back, but something will come back through that grieving process. Something will come back to fill that void, right?
Yeah.
So that's grief. Then the next emotion is fear. And the purpose of fear is this: I don't have enough information to go forward with safety.
I like that.
That's what fear is telling you. So what fear says is, wait, hang on, stop a moment. Something doesn't feel safe here. I don't have enough information to make a good decision, to take a good action, the right action, right? So let's just gather a little more information so that we feel comfortable. We might still be afraid, but at least we feel like we have enough information that we can make that step forward and face our fear. But to try to move forward when you're in terror is almost impossible. Mm-hmm. Like and fear doesn't want to run your life. It does not want to make the decisions. It just says, just do some research, please. Get a little more information for me, okay? But don't sit here and be afraid and then make your fear responsible for your life choices. Fear does not want that responsibility. It's just there to guide you and say, could you just give me a little more information? Could you just do a little more research?
Well, not everybody is really big into research. They're more into reaction. And so how would we, I mean, I know you want to go through the rest of the steps too, but let's circle back to that eventually and talk about how to uncover what's really holding you back.
Exactly. And when I get done with what the purpose is, then we'll go through each emotion and talk about how you evolve it. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. So then the next emotion is anger. And the purpose of anger is really very simple. Anger is designed to take you from a victim reality to a creator reality. When we feel angry, we might be triggered by anger for a whole bunch of reasons. My husband said this, or this person just cut me off. But ultimately, what anger's really saying is I feel powerless because I'm in a paradigm where I don't have any power. And so anger, when anger is evolved, it pulls you out of a victim reality and puts you into a place where your personal power is so high that you literally can create the life you are imagining. And that, to me, like, anger's our best friend, really. If we understand how to, and episode 2, we're going to really dive deeply into anger and rage work, because I think that that's the most important emotion right now for us to get a handle on, for us to work at evolving as a culture, as a race, as a species.
Oh, I so agree, because there is so much anger out there, as you can just watch the news one night.
Yeah, or just get on Facebook or any social media, and it's just like,
yes.
Okay.
Bunch of cats.
Yes.
I mean, not cats, but cats.
Then the fourth emotion is joy. Now, it's so interesting, because when I first started teaching this work, people would say to me, why are there 4 negative emotions and only one positive emotion? And it's like, well, because there are no negative emotions. They all have a purpose, so they're not negative. But joy, the purpose of joy is to create community and make things sacred and to share. So joy is not about, oh, today I'm happy, and so I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to, when we're happy, our inclination is to share that joy all around us with people we love, or just the person on the street, the postman, the little old lady coming out of the grocery store. You're just sharing the love because you're happy, right? You're joyful. So the purpose of joy is to create community and also to bring the sacredness back into the things that have lost their sacredness. That's a huge part of joy. And then the final emotion is empathy. And empathy has to do with our environment, okay? So empathy is the ability to feel what other life forms are feeling. You can feel trees, you can feel other people, you can feel rocks, you can feel water. It is the ability to feel your environment. That is the purpose of empathy. And I think that a lot of Western culture is designed to kill empathy because it hurts. If you feel other people's pain, you want to stop it. And so one of the biggest lessons of empathy is you learn how to set boundaries.
Oh, right.
Because you cannot be empathetic if you don't have good boundaries. I can feel your pain, I can sit with you through your pain, but I will not take it on for you unless you pay me. And even then, I will only do it within the confines of a session, right? So that was really good for me. I was very empathetic as a child, and I still have a tendency to want to fix what's wrong. And so for me to have a structure like my private practice is essential for me to be of value to people, because otherwise I would just bankrupt myself and it wouldn't do the other person any good. So those are the 5 emotions, and those are the purposes of each of those emotions. So now let's go on back. First, I'm going to talk about the spiral. There's a regressive
Right.
spiral, and then there's an evolutionary spiral. So if you start with grief, if your grief is repressed, that moves into fear as mistrust, okay? So repressed grief moves into fear as mistrust. Well, when you can't trust, then it's really hard to, be confident and take action, which is what anger wants to do. Anger's about taking action, taking right action. So when you move from grief and mistrust into fear, then fear moves into anger as a lack of courage, an inability to take any sort of action at all, paralysis, procrastination, okay? When anger is repressed, and this is what we're seeing all over the place, it comes out everywhere because it just wants to do damage. Anger does not like to be repressed. Anger wants us to listen to it. And so if you move into anger and with repressed grief and repressed fear, you're going to have a powder keg. Repressed anger will always look to kill joy.
Oh boy.
And I see this on social media constantly. I see the people who seem to be happy get piled on by people who are unhappy. And that is what it looks like in action. When we're unhappy, we don't want anybody else around us to be happy. So we'll find reasons to pick them apart. And we all do it. I'm as guilty as the next person. So when joy is repressed, because you're afraid to be happy because nobody else is happy, or my gosh, there's people hurting that are worse off with me, so I don't dare let myself be joyful, that is not only a great sadness, but it moves into empathy as a destructive energy into the environment. In your personal environment, in your heart environment, in your space, and in the world at large. It's a destructive force that goes out into the environment and does damage. So that's the repressive cycle. Let's move into something a little more happy now. Let's go into the evolutionary cycle of what the five the five emotions are about.
Evolve.
Yeah, let's evolve. Okay. So, grief that's been expressed, and the thing about it's so many of the people I know and love, when they move into grief, their dog dies, or a parent dies, or something major like that happens, and they start the process, and then it's like they shut themselves off as quickly as they can. Like, I can cry for 30 seconds, but no longer, kind of a thing. You have to really let it move. And when I was studying with Malidoma Patrice Samé, he was this shaman from Africa, and in their village, they would have grief ceremonies that lasted for 3 days. And it was like, kind of like anything that you were grieving throughout the previous 6 months or whatever since the last ceremony was invited to come to the ceremony. And they felt that people who couldn't grieve were mentally ill.
Oh.
So the first day was like everybody screaming, crying, people would, I call it ignition, where the emotion takes over. Like, people would be pulling their hair out and screaming and crying, laying on the ground, kicking and screaming. And the whole village did it. And they had a group of musicians who would travel around the village playing songs that were designed to make you feel sad, right? So you could grieve. So this went on for kind of like 2 days. 2 days they would do the grieving, and then the third day was the celebration and the feast. And all the joy would come back in because the grief had cleaned out, there was a rotor-rooter, an emotional rotor-rooter, and then there was room for joy to come in and community.
Did they do anything like a fire ceremony where maybe they're putting effigies into the fire and
I don't
kind
think
of
so.
burning it out that
No,
way?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I've done all that stuff. I've done so many different kinds of ritual and studied so many different, modalities around the world. And I find that a lot of that stuff doesn't ever really touch the emotion. It's an action that we take because our mind tells us that it's appropriate, but it doesn't really actually evolve the emotion. You have to really feel and act on the feeling to evolve it. So for grieving, that means crying. When I feel like I need to grieve, but I can't quite get there, I either watch rescue videos of dogs or horses, or I find myself a good sad movie. I have a whole handful of them, and I'm like, it's time to cry. And then I'll just sob and sob and sob until there's nothing left. And then it's like, okay, feeling better now, moving right along. And sometimes that might take days for me to really get to the bottom of the grief.
Well, and I'm sure that there's people that are still grieving from something that happened maybe 20 years ago.
Of course.
And they just don't know how. There's nobody
Yes.
coaching them.
Yes.
And maybe they find the wrong coach.
Yes.
Right? That doesn't help them.
Yes, there's a lot of therapists who will tell you not to indulge your emotions, and I'm saying indulge them. Like they're just messengers who are saying to you, let's evolve this feeling. So grief, you want to evolve your grief by grieving.
Yeah, I've even read one practitioner suggested that you just blank it out, let it go.
Oh yeah,
And I'm thinking that's the worst way to go.
well, it doesn't happen. If
Yeah.
we could just let it go, why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
This is the thing I say to people. If we could just let it go, wouldn't we all be doing that right now?
Yes.
Would we be sitting in traffic screaming, the F word at the top of our lungs if we could just let it go? I don't think so.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I have been there.
Me too. Why do you think that was so quick on my mind? Okay, so the evolution of fear. So how do you evolve fear? Okay, so for me, sitting on the floor and rocking is, for me, one of the best ways to express fear. And I also find writing it, when I say my fear says what? My fear says this, my fear says this, my fear says this. And what happens is I get to ignition, and it's like, I'll start writing fears that I didn't even know I had. And I remember when I first started doing this work, for an entire year, I had this journal, and I kept writing, I am so scared, I am so scared, I am so scared. And then I went to my conscious language class, and they said, anything that comes after I am, you're basically declaring to the universe that that's who you are.
True, yeah.
And so I went home and I went, well, no wonder I kept creating more and more and more fear, because I kept, so then I changed it to, what does my fear say? What is my fear saying to me? So my fear says, and during that year, during the next year then, where I did this practice, every time I would write about my fear, when I'd get to the very end, it would say, my fear says, what if this is all a big joke? There is nothing after you die, and all this work is for naught.
Oh boy.
That was the place I came to over and over and over again. And finally I was like, well, okay, so what if there isn't anything after you die? What if this is it? What if it's all a big joke? And I was like, I guess I wouldn't really change anything that I'm doing. So, okay, there you go then. That was the end of that. So that was a deep-seated fear that maybe I was born with, that I carried with me from another life, or who knows. But,
yeah, right.
And then, okay, so now let's go to anger. Anger, stay tuned for the next episode, because we're going to do a deep dive into rage work. The body's hardwired to hit when it's angry. Most people don't know that, but that is why children always automatically strike out when they're mad, because the body's hardwired for that. So when I learned that, I thought, well, when I get angry, what if I embraced it? What if I went into it? What if I really took my body's hardwiring and went with it? So I developed these rage dolls, and I started playing with them and practicing with them. And one day I hit ignition, and I just went crazy. The things that happen to me after I've done rage work have been miraculous. My reality has changed in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we need to do a whole episode on just anger, because that's really important to understand, and also to see how it's done.
Yeah, and that'll be next.
That'll be next.
That'll be next.
Joy.
Well, let's go back to anger for
Okay,
a minute,
all right.
because I think there's so much anger out there right now, and people feel trapped in their anger. And so, can you give us any, for one thing, the journaling?
Yes.
The journaling is huge, and
Yes.
people that have PTSD
Yes.
Do a lot of journaling in order to get through that.
Yep.
So I think that is a really good
Yep,
point.
my anger says. And I find that half of what my anger says is anger at myself. And it will use, it will swear at me. It will use just terrible language. And I'm just like, okay, just bring it, you know, I'm listening. And then, you know, it's like an onion. As you journal those things, you get deeper and deeper into it.
Yeah, peeling back the layers.
I myself like to use the rage doll. I like to hit because that's really satisfying to me. I once had a client who had a son. He didn't want to do the rage work, but he liked to break things. So we had these big pieces of glass that somebody gave me, and I gave them to her. And he put them down the basement, you know, with safety glasses and gloves and everything. And he just threw a huge rock, set each piece up, gave them a name, who he was mad at. She said, I heard my name. And then he smashed them, and he cleaned everything up, and it was done for him. That's all it took for him. He was just done.
Wow, okay.
And she said it changed his personality because he was able to express it through his body.
Right.
Not sitting in a room talking to somebody about it.
Or talking to himself about it.
Or talking to himself about it, exactly. Or inappropriately striking out at somebody else.
Right.
Because that's how anger, when it's repressed, will eventually show up by hitting something.
Wow, okay. All right, next.
Joy. Next is joy. How do we express joy? We express joy by sharing. We express joy by making it sacred. I really want to stress how important it is to bring sacredness back into our lives. I'm not talking about religion. I am talking about sacred. The reason that we bless our food is that it literally changes the vibration of the food. You could be eating White Castle, and if you pray over it or you do whatever your little sacred ritual is, thank you, Mother Earth, thank you for everyone who grew this food, for everyone who shipped this food, for everyone who packed this food and got it to my table, thank you for the abundance. Whatever your little ritual is, it literally changes the energy of the thing. So joy, when we're feeling happy, we have this power to make everything sacred again. And if all of us were doing that every single day, the world would change so quickly. We wouldn't even recognize it, probably.
Oh, probably not, yeah. I mean, the whole world doing that and getting to that
Yes.
point may take a little while.
It can happen really quickly, in the twinkling of an eye.
In a twinkling of an eye.
And then
Okay.
the other part of joy, expressing joy, is to share. Sometimes that means sharing your pain, but not in a way where you expect somebody else to do something about it. But sometimes it means sharing what you have. I always keep a stack of $1 bills in the car for the homeless people when I see them at the corner. So it's however you share, that sharing is an expression of joy. That's an evolving expression. All right?
For me, it's just a simple smile.
Yes.
You smile at somebody, you give them a compliment.
Yes.
You could have made somebody's day
Exactly.
just by those simple acts
Yep.
of kindness.
I love to compliment cashiers that are really good at their job. And I'll say to them, you know what? You are really good at this, and you could do anything you wanted. Just wanted to let you know that. Because then it makes them think like, oh, maybe I could do anything I wanted. All right, and then finally we'll get to empathy. The evolvement of empathy, the evolution of empathy, is to restore and renew the environment. And that includes your emotional environment, your home, and the world around you. So expressing empathy in an evolving manner means becoming aware of your environment and doing something to make it better. And that can be as simple as planting pollinator flowers, native pollinator flowers for the native pollinators in your yard. It can be, joining a work crew to go out and take all the buckthorn out. It can be anything that you do just to make your environment a better place.
Like adopt a highway.
Like adopt a highway, exactly. So those are the ways that you evolve all 5 of those emotions.
Well, the empathy is tricky because when you're an empath and you feel other people's feelings, you have to learn how to not take them on yourself, because most of the time people want to. It's a natural thing. It's a nurturing thing. I need to take care of this person.
Yep.
And how would you help somebody not
Anger,
to get past that?
Rage work is literally the best thing you can do to set boundaries. It will set its own boundaries. Anger, when it's an evolved state, will set its own boundaries. It's like people will not even be able. When I first started doing rage work, I didn't really notice much of a difference until one day a woman came to me, and I was always attracting people who were victims because I was always trying to help them. And she came to me and she did the usual thing that she had done in the past, which was very passive aggressive, laying out these little nuggets that I normally would have jumped on and said, oh, I can help you with that. And it just didn't even, it was like Teflon, you know, it just rolled off. And at the end, when she left, really kind of upset, and I was thinking, why is she upset? And then I played the conversation back through, and I was like, oh, I did not fall for any of the little
triggers.
I didn't pick any of those
She's
up.
trying to trigger you.
Yes.
To take it on.
Yes.
Here,
and
take my issues, and now I don't have them anymore.
Yes.
You have my burden. Thank you so much for being my pack mule.
Yeah. And so that was a kind of, I was like, oh, that rage work is doing some good. So yes, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next episode, about how to use anger as a way to set boundaries. And let me just be really clear that this work should be done by yourself, all of it. The relationship you have with yourself and your emotional body is critically important to your ability to become a creator with enough personal power to create the life that you choose. And one of the first things is that you have to trust yourself. And so doing this work with other people isn't safe, especially anger. It's very hard to do rage work with other people, except if you're in a big group. Like I've had fun with, 25 people in a group doing it at the same time.
That's a lot of people.
That was really fun. And we moved a lot of energy that day, let me tell you.
Pillow fight.
I know, right? That the pillow fighting would be a great way to do rage work, especially for kids.
Oh, yeah.
To do pillow fighting.
Maybe that's why they do it.
Well, except that I don't, when I work with children, I stress to them, it's never okay to hit another person, even with a pillow.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful about the kinds of messages that we send across.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I can see that we're coming up to 1 minute, so we're going to have to wrap up pretty quickly. And I would really like to encourage your audience to come back for the next episode, because we're going to do a deep dive into rage work. I'm going to show you how it's done, and then we're going to talk about the benefits of doing rage work, because the anger, to me, seems to have a lot more benefits when you move it to its evolved state. It governs commitment. It governs the ability to attract resources. It governs so many things when it's an evolved state. And the way that you feel, like when I'm in my balanced anger, I move differently. It's just a wonderful feeling.
Well, we are going to have to wrap it up, as you said. And I totally look forward to the next segment we're going to do here, which will be on rage work. So, that said, thank you for joining us on this show, and we'll see you next time. Bye now. Did I time that out perfectly?
Wow. How was that, Dave?
There's tears in my eyes.
Oh,
That was really good.
Great.
And how you turn the damn thing off.
How do you turn this damn thing off? Pat, help.
You can't turn it off.
Where's Patrick?
I don't know.
Oh, there he is. Here he comes.
Oh, hi.
Well, I hope that ended well. I mean, he seems happy with it.
I feel like we were a little, I was a little not as smooth as I
You were great.
have been, but
You were great.
thank you.